Good morning, everybody. 2 hours of Gojo and Golic about to come your way. 3 shows left, so make sure you tune in for all 2 hours of all 3 shows. All right, is the concrete jungle where dreams are made of for Russell Wilson? He signed with the New York Giants. We will talk about that. Plus, Jimmy Butler was back in Miami last night, and he got booed the entire time, and the Warriors lost without Steph Curry. We'll break that one down. Plus, we have some great guests joining the program today. Mike Tannenbaum, Tim Kurkjian. It's going to be great. Make sure you tune in. Don't go anywhere. 2 hours of Gojo and Golic starts right now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here with you guys. Fun one coming up. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review. 5-star ratings. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here, as Jesse said, for, I guess, 2 more days after this. You're already here for this day, so it doesn't count as much. But either way, the Gojo and Golic YouTube page is where you can find that and continue to find content there. Great guests, as Jesse did mention, as well. Tim Kurkjian, the only man that really truly makes me enjoy talking baseball more and more every time. Every time I talk to Tim Kurkjian, I leave and I'm like, you know what? I am going to get more into baseball this year outside of just gorging various ballpark foods around the country. So I've got that to look forward to off the top of the next hour. And then Mike Tannenbaum, who put out a mock draft yesterday. And Dad, this has to be such a brutal feeling. You sit there and you work through all these different iterations of what you're going to do. And like we pointed out, you've had to do mock drafts in the past before. You go through all the work of it, and then you click send it in, ESPN.com puts it up, only for Russell Wilson to then sign with the New York Giants and change at least 3 picks in your draft and have to go back and rework all this and throw trades into there. So Russell Wilson, while the big signing yesterday and a lot that we have to break down off that, definitely made more work for our buddy Mike T, who's going to join us in about 30 minutes here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's why they have so many mock drafts. After the combine, after pro days, if someone were to do bad on a pro day, obviously after free agency, after trades, after signings. But I mean, does this really stop the Giants from taking a quarterback? I mean, you have 2 quarterbacks now in Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson that basically count, $14 million against the cap? You know, when you have quarterbacks counting 60 million, 55 million, 50 in the 40s, they're counting roughly 14 million. It's a 1-year deal for Russ, 2 years at $4 million a year for Jameis. So roughly in the area of, let me just put it this way. It's a cheap amount on the salary cap for the quarterback.
Yes. So again, the news yesterday, if you all missed it, Russell Wilson, one of the last remaining guys in the quarterback game of musical chairs we've described this offseason, ends up signing before Aaron Rodgers. Doesn't want to wait around for that decision to come down. Russ takes a 1-year deal worth up to $21 million, which I'm sure is full of incentives that are going to be pretty difficult to reach, with $10.5 million guaranteed. So that's really the number to hold on to. As Dad mentioned, Jameis Winston, previously on Dragon Ball Z, had signed there 2 years, $8 million. And so, yeah, Dad, the question did then become, what do the Giants do at number 3? The way I read this, and I'm curious for your read on this when I saw it, was, hey, the New York Giants now just created an insurance policy so they don't have to spend capital trying to move up in this draft. Because there had been a lot of thought, depending on who you listen to, that yes, Cam Ward is obviously going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. And then there was a better than zero chance that Shedeur Sanders would be the next quarterback off the board for the Cleveland Browns, who are in dire need after the failed Deshaun Watson experiment. And so if you were the New York Giants, there was this dilemma, I'm sure, of, hey, are we going to have to try and go and pry ourselves into one of those 1 or 2 slots to get a quarterback? Now New York can say, all right, if Shedeur Sanders falls down to 3, great. But we are not going to spend resources moving up to then overdraft in a draft where it feels like that's going to be what it is in the top 2 picks, while we've got our head coach and our GM walking into this season firmly on the hot seat. We're not going to put any more than we have to into that equation in order to get there. If the quarterback comes to us, maybe we'll pull the trigger on it at 3, but what they've created now, Dad, is at least the ability to stand pat where they are and not have to put anything more chips onto the table in the midst of a hand that they might not think is a winner.
Yeah, they really can't afford to give up assets. They have too many holes to fill. And again, this comes down to, and it's something I've talked about, and it's not like this is recreating the wheel. This all depends on their grade on Shedeur Sanders. It looks like Cam Ward is going to Tennessee. After the pro day workout, it supposedly solidified it that he worked out in shorts and a T-shirt. But they are going to bring him in for a private workout, have him throw again and again. I think there is value in that, getting him in the classroom, going over film and over things, so to solidify that number 1 pick. They've also raised the price tag if someone wants to jump to number 1. But they're going to take Cam Ward. Everything revolves around the quarterback in the NFL. So to me, this now depends. You can think one of 2 ways. It isn't to just what you said, an insurance policy to not have to go up and grab a quarterback because you grabbed Russell Wilson. It also is a sign to me, and I thought this all along, what's the grade on Shedeur? Is it a franchise quarterback? Because you take him at number 3, it's exactly what you have to play him as. It's exactly what you picked him for. Then it's exactly how at some point he has to take over the team. The Trey Lance situation was an outlier in San Francisco, where they traded up for him high in the first round, but a 7th round pick comes through and plays really well and makes the high pick expendable, and he eventually goes to Dallas. That's not the norm. The norm is a high pick gets a chance to lead that team. So to me, what's the grade the Giants have on Shedeur Sanders? And does this now change them and saying, you know what, we'll live through this year with the quarterback situation and worry about the quarterback situation next year? I find that hard to believe, but I don't know what their grade is on Shedeur, because either, Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter are going to be available at 3. If Tennessee takes one of those 2 will be available at 3. And, do you get Travis Hunter? Could play corner and could be another weapon for your veteran quarterbacks. So to me, it all comes down to the grade they have on Shedeur Sanders. Is it a definite, he's a franchise quarterback, he can lead our team for the next decade? Because you pick at 3, it's exactly what you're picking him for.
Well, one person believes that could still be possible. ESPN's Adam Schefter, before this signing went down, said this about the potential for that number 3 pick for the New York Giants.
I would say that their quarterback room is and continues to be a work in progress. Yes, the Giants have signed Tommy DeVito. They've signed Jameis Winston. They are still very much in the market for Russell Wilson. And ultimately, it wouldn't surprise me if Russell Wilson chose the Giants over the Browns and the Steelers, 2 other teams that he continues to talk to. But let's live in a universe here where Russell Wilson picks the Giants. I still think with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and Tommy, I still think the Giants may go ahead and take Shedeur Sanders at number 3.
And, Dad, I think the bigger thing comes down to less the grade, because, listen, grade-wise, we know these quarterbacks aren't going to stack up to the ones in years past and probably wouldn't get the franchise-level grade in a lot of seasons, but it's in the context of this draft, and in the Giants' case, I think it's in the context of who's making the decision. Because if you're Joe Shane, if you're Brian Daboll, I'd imagine you want the rookie in there to offer you some sort of upside when your job is on the line this year. We've usually seen that as the defense mechanism for a lot of coaches going into the last year of their deals. Now, it doesn't work out. I'm not saying that's a good line of thinking, but going into this year and having them something to show them and say, hey, we need something to pop, because I don't think you can count on Russell Wilson at this point in the context of this Giants offense to come in and author you the kind of winning season that's going to save your job if you're those guys.
And first off, I don't think Russell Wilson, I don't think he didn't choose Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh wanted Russell Wilson back, in talking about what Adam Schefter said. No. I mean, he wasn't going back to Pittsburgh. So I don't think that was a choice for Russell Wilson. And when Adam said he chose New York over Pittsburgh and Cleveland, he didn't choose over Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh didn't want him back. And my thought is, if you have Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, is Shedeur Sanders going to see the field? Will he see the field in year one? Because you have two veterans, if both veterans are on the team, you have two veterans to take to play while Shedeur sits and waits. And let me say this, if Shedeur doesn't play and they have a bad year, now if they have a bad year, they should put Shedeur out there to get him some experience. But if he doesn't play or doesn't play much and they have a bad year, Brian Daboll isn't going to have to worry about Shedeur Sanders in the future of the team. He won't be the coach. You know how this works. I mean, we've talked about this. Bring in a young quarterback and who doesn't play much or doesn't play at all, and the team is awful. Ownership is going to bring in a new coach and a new GM to work with the new quarterback. So I don't know what kind of position Brian Daboll is in.
Well, this is usually the strategy that we see employed is rookie quarterback gets drafted on a coaching staff and a regime that is going into the season on the hot seat. They start the season off with a veteran quarterback. Then about midway through the season, they put in the rookie. And things might go bad for a little bit, but then all of a sudden, if there's any modicum of success, now that coach can point to management and say, look, we just needed the right quarterback, and now I just need time. Usually what happens is management goes, well, no, we've got the right quarterback now, and I want a better coach to go and mold that quarterback, and so we're going to get rid of you. It almost always blows up. I'll go back. I did the exhaustive list years ago, but there's a pretty well-worn path of that track record not working out well for coaches. So I'm with you, Dad. Like, if you're talking about self-preservation, picking quarterback is usually the best chance to try and make a big enough impact to maybe affect your job. If you're talking about the long-term benefit for the New York Giants as an organization, then I'm with you. Taking the best player available, meaning if you had Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter slip to you there, which, if you've got Cam Ward going at number 1 overall, one of those guys is going to make it to you. I'm going down that path if I'm the New York Giants, and I'm setting myself up beyond this because, again, to me, the Russell Wilson signing in conjunction with Jameis is sort of a hedge by the organization to say, hey, we're not really sure how this is going to work out, and we're also not really sure if we want to feel like we need to saddle a rookie with coming in and saving this situation, knowing that the roster is just not in a position to go out there and support that guy, and we'd probably be closer to what Caleb Williams went through last year than what C.J. Stroud went through 2 years before in his rookie season.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even for Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston or Shedeur, I mean, you have Malik Neighbors to throw to at 109 receptions. Wan'Dale Robinson had 93. They don't really have a tight end that had any catches. The running game isn't very good, so it's going to be very difficult for a quarterback. Quarterbacks were sacked 48 times for the Giants last year. So it's going to be difficult for any quarterback. Now, Shedeur is used to being hit. He was sacked about 3.2 million times over the last 2 years. He's used to getting hit, but it's a different kind of hit in the NFL that he's going to take. This will be interesting. And I'm glad we're talking to Mike Tannenbaum today, a former GM, and try and get in the mind of a GM and say, what's the thought process here of bringing in two veterans, albeit very cheap against the cap, and still needing a future quarterback, or is this going to throw a curve into the draft?
That is something we can ask Mike T about in about 20 minutes here. So again, Russell Wilson signing a one-year deal with the New York Giants, joining that quarterback room with Tommy DeVito and Jameis Winston. As people have said, the jockeying for the pregame prayer going to be an absolute show in New York between Russ and Jameis. So while we wait for that, Jesse, let's talk about a team that's trying to help their young quarterback here. The New England Patriots, big move yesterday that's got to have Boston pretty excited.
They signed a wide receiver. Can you believe it? guys. You are hearing that correctly. 4-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Stefon Diggs has agreed to terms with the Patriots. It's a 3-year, $69 million deal. Nice. That includes $26 million guaranteed. Now, Diggs, who's 31, is recovering from that season-ending ACL injury that he suffered in the Houston Texans Week 8 game. His rehab is on course, and according to Adam Schefter, he's expected to be ready for Week 1. And after he signed, he posted this on his Instagram story. What does it mean? Because I don't know. This is not what I would have expected. I think it means like he's looking at that deal. He's looking at this opportunity like he's ready to go. But I don't know. I don't know what it means. What do you think it means?
Come on, guys. You don't know what that means? I mean, you seriously don't? I mean, I'm 62 and I know what that means. Seriously.
What does it mean, Senior?
I have no idea. Okay. Zero clue.
That's what I thought.
Absolutely no idea whatsoever what that means. None.
Yeah. Stefon Diggs' social media presence is a glory to behold, and if you haven't been following him, do so. I think there's a couple of fun secret assignments in there as well. But, Dad, this one for me, I sort of had some fun with it yesterday, but it's the, Lord, I've seen what you've done for Josh Allen, and I want that for Drake May too. We know that Stefon Diggs, while he didn't make Josh Allen, I know that I talked to some Bills fans yesterday that were very sensitive to that notion. Stefon Diggs was a major part of the early development of Josh Allen in Buffalo. Now, Josh and Drake, very different quarterbacks in a lot of ways, but this idea that he was a very quarterback-friendly receiver, especially as Mina Kimes pointed out, even last year, because obviously towards the end of his tenure in Buffalo, production had dropped a little bit and made them more comfortable with moving on. Mina Kimes pointed out that last year before Diggs got hurt, he was top 3 in ESPN's wide receiver score. He was 4th in catches under 20 yards. So he can be that good short area reliable target, Dad. We always talk about that idea of a tight end being a quarterback's best friend. But if you've got a receiver like Stefon Diggs, that's a veteran who knows how to get open, even if he's not doing it as quickly as he used to, that's extremely valuable, even at a price tag that we all look at and sort of wince, understanding, hey, the Patriots and the position they've been in at wide receiver, last year 28th in receiving overall as a team, you were probably going to have to overpay to get veteran help, and you had the money to do it.
Boy, that's a lot of money for a 31-year-old going into his 11th year, coming off an ACL, which if he is ready for Week 1, that's basically 10, 11 months to repair a 31-year-old's ACL. Again, young in normal age, but older in football. That's having money to spend and overpaying to get it, because this was a disastrous team. They were 25th in the league in wide receiver receptions, last in the league in wide receiver yards. They only had one wide receiver, Demario Douglas, that was over 600 yards. The leading receiver yardage-wise was Hunter Henry, both receptions and yardage, or tight end. So they really are hurting at the receiver position. I get, Mike, that it's a veteran, and a veteran could help. Listen, he was 7th in the league when he got hurt last year with, I think, 47 receptions. So he was doing well, and I'm not saying he can't do well. I do think it's a nice weapon for Drake May, but not a long-term weapon for Drake May.
I think the devil will be in the details. And as we've seen with a lot of contracts this offseason, like we see 3 years, $69 million, 26 guaranteed. Let's wait till we find out how that's structured. I'd be stunned, Dad, if this wasn't a deal that they could get out relatively easy from pretty early on if things didn't go well that first year. I would bet the guarantee structure, even in this, could be one of those where it guarantees at a certain point next year before the new league year. And so if it went horrifically and he's just cooked at this point, they might be able to get out from under that. But at the very least, they can try and get in on some of the upside if they look at last year and like what they saw for at least part of that time. And the other part of this, Dad, is they're not done. They can't be done going hunting here. No. And that's where the draft is going to come into play, which is another area where New England and wide receivers have not always been the easiest fit, is in the NFL draft. But at the very least, it's a starting point. And in an offseason where the Patriots have thrown a bunch of stuff at the wall, signing a bunch of different guys, especially on defense, they're going to try and see what sticks. Coming up next, Jimmy Butler made his triumphant return to Miami. Wet fart noise next. And so I go in there, la-di-da, in the middle of the day, open this cabinet, and sure enough, two wee beady eyes staring me right in the face, packed with a bunch of fur behind it from underneath that sink. And so I respond, as any grown adult would, by screaming uncomfortably loud, running out of the room, shutting all the doors, and then calling animal control, who comes back here and bravely approaches the wild animal underneath my sink to, yes, reveal a possum hanging out in my bathroom, snoring. If you can't, you can see it in this video, but you cannot hear the sound. I was dead stunned. This possum had become so comfortable and apparently been here for so long that it was catching a few Z's and sawing open logs underneath the sink thanks to a hole behind my wall.
Miss him. Miss the possum. Yeah. That was what a time. What a time to be alive.
It's amazing how much I learned, Dad, about possums or opossums, whatever we're supposed to call it, during that time period, and how much it's changed my relationship with that animal.
And we still don't know where the possum is because the animal control did not catch the possum. The possum went back out the hole in your wall, and you just covered up the hole so it couldn't get back in. So we have no idea where this possum found a nice, comfortable home under your sink where maybe, you know, a nicer person living in the house would have let him live there, would have treated him as a pet. Now he's back out in the wild. We don't know if he's still alive or not.
The possum was for the streets.
I actually saw that possum weeks later hauled off the field at a Texas Tech football game. So he'd been doing some traveling and made his way into some places he wasn't supposed to be. I hope he or she is doing well, and I am sorry about the unexpected eviction there. But, man, he was a comfy little guy. Again, a bunch of great things about them. Not big biters. They're going to poop when you scare them too much because that's the whole playing possum thing. Their blood's too cold to carry disease. They eat ticks and all this stuff, so they're actually good for your home ecosystem. Shout out to possums, man. Better allies than I had ever imagined. And that one deserved better, Dad. You're right. That's on me. So I'll try and be a better teammate to the next possum that comes through the house here. Speaking of teammates, Jimmy Butler went back to Miami. How's that for a possum transition? Jimmy Butler made his triumphant return back to the Miami Heat last night with the Golden State Warriors. And, Dad, we knew everything about Jimmy Butler's run so far. They had been, 16-4 since Jimmy Butler came over in that trade from the Miami Heat. They had looked really good, even in the last few games without Steph Curry. Jimmy had kind of been going off, and then it's gone. Here was Jimmy Butler on his return to South Beach and all the complex emotions he was grappling with.
Like I always say, I got a lot of love for the city, for the fan base here. The video was nice. I won't say that there was a lot of emotions, though. I think I went into this thing level-headed. We wanted to win the game. It didn't go the way we planned, but we were good.
So there weren't many emotions and there weren't many points for Jimmy Butler. He finished with 11 points, including two in the first half of this game as the Miami Heat, Dad, blew them out. It was never close. Now, Steph Curry made the trip, but ultimately did not play in this game. They've got a break and don't play again until Friday, and so they're targeting that as they let him get as healthy as possible down the home stretch of this season. Jimmy Butler had to be looking over at Steph on the bench like, dog, you couldn't come back for this one game and help me out so they didn't rub my nose in it, because it was clear from the jump. Bam Adebayo and this Miami Heat team, Dad, came out with an extra edge in this game, and they let them know that they were not missing anybody around there in South Beach.
Yeah, and as far as the crowd, they booed him. You could hear the boos. Some people cheered him. Every time he touched the balls, there was some light boos. It's an apathetic crowd in Miami. I mean, it's just the way the fan base is. I don't think they really get into a whole lot. At least I don't think, Mike. I don't know if you do.
Well, no, I mean, that was what Steve Kerr had to say about this one after the game. Like, I had not really been sure what role Steve Kerr was going to play in this comeback, and he was the one that took like a subtle jab at the Miami Heat crowd. Take a listen. This is Steve Kerr after the game mentioning that reception that Jimmy Butler got.
I didn't know what was going on pregame because there was a video with no sounds. Yeah, I was wondering what was happening. Miami is it's a great place to live, and so people don't ever seem too amped up around here. They're living the good life. So it really wasn't that rabid of an environment. It was typical Miami.
It's true.
All right. So the shade out in full force for Steve Kerr in defense of Jimmy Butler. I mean, Dad, that makes it worse. It's not like the crowd was a factor in this. The Heat just kicked their ass in this game thoroughly. Tyler Hero went off in this game, as he has been wont to do, and this is, I believe, first NBA All-Star season. And then Bam Adebayo giving them buckets in the first half of that game. So all in all, like, they could say whatever they want about the crowd. The crowd didn't matter. Yeah, Jimmy Butler got booed, but Jimmy Butler also got worked out there on the court in a way that I know he didn't really let on much of the emotion, Dad, had to be seething after this game.
I mean, and it wasn't just him. Each Golden State starter had exactly 2 points at halftime. The starters scored 10 of Golden State's points at halftime. I mean, that's horrific. They missed their first 14 threes. Their first 14 threes, they finished 9 of 38. Was it Miami's defense? Or was it just awful, awful shooting? The Heat were 17 to 25 on threes. They were absolutely on fire shooting threes, and they never trailed in this game. Yeah, you're right. This one had to be where Jimmy Butler had to just sit and eat it, right? And because Steph was there in street clothes, and it just goes to show how much Steph means to this team from a shooting standpoint.
No, truly, because you mentioned some of those shots were getting sent back packing. Andrew Wiggins had a phenomenal defensive game. Khalil Ware, the rookie 7-footer for Miami, was awesome in this game. Running up and down the court, acrobatic highlight plays. That guy looked great. So up and down, yeah, it was difficult, and I did enjoy after the game. Because I believe Jimmy Butler, as soon as the whistle sounded, went to the locker room. They said outside of going over and hugging Kevin Love, there really weren't a lot of pleasantries with Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. You had Pat Riley shots in the crowd of him overlording the entire court. And then after the game, I know they were teammates on Team USA, but Bam Adebayo and Steph Curry catching up a little bit. I'd imagine that conversation was something like, all right, here's how this is going to go. You're in the honeymoon phase right now. Enjoy this, because eventually he will betray you, like he does all of us. Getting the starter pack there, because, Dad, that'll be really, they got through this first moment in the grand scheme of things for the Warriors. Am I that worried about what it means for them? No, because this drives home, Dad, the point when we were talking about Golden State as a competitor in the postseason versus the Los Angeles Lakers as a competitor in the postseason, and what might give us more pause if for both teams you took the best player in LeBron James or in Steph Curry off the court. It's a question of, hey, would Jimmy Butler and the way that they're constructed with him alone be enough to sustain you through some games the same way Luka Doncic and the Lakers would be? And I do think Luka Doncic-led Lakers, I would have slightly more faith in than the Jimmy Butler-led Golden State Warriors if it came down to that, considering injury to the stars on those teams.
Well, looking at 10 games left, the Heat are definitely going to be in the play-in. It's just a matter if they're 9th or 10th. They're one game behind Chicago, who's sitting 9th, and like 3.5, 4 behind Orlando. So it's going to be either 9th and 10th, because Toronto at 11, they're 6 games ahead of. For Golden State, they're really on the cusp of falling out of the playoffs and into the play-in. They're basically 2.5 ahead of or behind the Lakers for the 5 spot, but the Clippers are only a half game, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are sitting at 7 and 8, are a half game. And all 3 of those teams, by the way, throw the Lakers in, all 4 of those teams, Lakers have lost their last 3. Golden State has lost their last 2. Clippers and Minnesota lost their last game. So nobody making up ground on anybody, but well, still the Lakers, even with LeBron back, have now lost 3 in a row. But they're probably pretty comfortable in the 5 slot with 10 games to go. So again, it's Golden State, the Clippers, and Minnesota, 3 teams fighting for the last playoff spot, the 6th spot, and the other 2 will be in the play-in.
Yeah, so a lot riding on Steph Curry's return to kind of steady the ship for this team that wants to stay inside of it. For Miami on the other side, I think this was more about just, salvaging something post-trade deadline. They're 6 games clear of Toronto in the Eastern Conference as far as falling out of the play-in at the 10 spot, so I don't think they're in any real danger there. But, Dad, it had been an abject disaster since the trade deadline. Since Jimmy Butler had left, this team had looked pretty hapless, and so to see them put it together, whatever the added motivation was last night, if they can carry that over, at the very least, getting back into the postseason with guys that were there, right? Like, it wasn't like it was only Jimmy Butler playing in the postseason, even though postseason Jimmy was the thing that gave this team teeth. The rest of this group has the experience to at least be an interesting out in right now an Eastern Conference play-in field that includes the Atlanta Hawks, the Orlando Magic, who, listen, the other night saw Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero put up 30 points each in their win over the Lakers, and then the Bulls right after that. So it's not necessarily a field where you feel priced out if you're Miami and you bring the kind of effort and intensity that you brought last night for those teams. Let's switch gears, though, Dad, in the Eastern Conference, because you talk about some teams that have been falling a little bit. The Milwaukee Bucks have been on a bit of a slide. They've lost 3 of their last 5, 6 of their last 10 games. They're now 5th in the Eastern Conference, and they just got the unfortunate news that Damian Lillard going to be out indefinitely as he suffered a deep vein thrombosis. Remember, we just went through this now in the shoulder with Victor Wembanyama at the Spurs, who got shut down for the rest of the season. But Damian Lillard here developed a deep vein thrombosis in his calf and is now on blood thinners to control that. But because of that, you know, the blood thinners, the worry becomes that if you take any sort of contact, there could be ramifications. And so he's going to be out indefinitely while they monitor that. And Dad, just a huge loss for them. Now, small sample size this year, they were 8-5 with Damian Lillard off the court, and their offense drops pretty substantially, about just over 7 points per game offensively without him on the court. So for a Milwaukee Bucks team, Dad, that had sort of been in that middle ground the way we talked about the Eastern Conference, this is a pretty big blow as this season it finally seemed like we were starting to get what we expected out of this duo.
Yeah, listen, remember Victor Wembanyama was shut down for the season with this exact same thing. So it's hard to think that Damian Lillard's going to come back. And they have been. They were 4-6 in their last 10. They're kind of battling with Detroit. They have the same, basically the same record for that 5th and 6th slot. They'll be in the playoffs because Atlanta in the 7th slot, the first play-in, is too far behind. But they're right there with the Pacers 4, Milwaukee 5, and Detroit 6. Those 3 teams kind of fighting for 4, 5, and 6. So they're going to be in the playoffs. But I would imagine without Damian Lillard, which will be a big blow to that team, no doubt about it.
It's really interesting where we're at now with a guy like Giannis at this point in his career, right? He's been in the league for over a decade now. He's a champion. He's a multiple-time MVP. He's got all these accolades, but Dad, there was so long where it felt like Giannis was next, and he was supposed to be the consensus best player in the world for a really long run. And then Nikola Jokic just popped onto the scene, and now it's like we've lost interest in Giannis as the other big man that came to us from a different country. And the Milwaukee Bucks have sort of found themselves in the space that, quite honestly, Dad, Giannis was always threatening. If we got to this place, I will go finish my career somewhere else. Now, some of that could have been posturing for contracts that he signed, moves like getting Damian Lillard over to Milwaukee. But I'm going to be fascinated if we're dealing with another early playoff exit for the Milwaukee Bucks this year, what this means for the future of a guy who in the most recent, Giannis being, freaky quote I saw, basically said that winning and achieving at the highest level and winning championships is better than intimacy, is better than sex. So this guy every once in a while will kind of let us know he's willing to go and bang the saber on the table if things aren't going the way he likes. And this seems like the kind of blow that's going to send them closer back to that trajectory.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because even though that they're going to be in the playoffs, nobody thinks of them as a threat. Certainly now without Damian Lillard, I think him having a championship under his belt relieves him a little bit that he does have one. But you're right. The impatience of him, we've heard it the last couple of off seasons of building. Now, I mean, what can you do about this injury to Damian Lillard? I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But you're right. His impatience has been shown the last couple of off seasons, and we don't know if it was about money or not. But you wonder if that will start. He'll start ringing that bell again.
Yeah, it can be very interesting. Glad above all else that Damian Lillard, they found this. He's going to be fine, and we'll see. Hopefully he can continue basketball, but at the very least can go and live comfortably as well. Mike Tannenbaum going to visit with us next year on Gojo and Golic.
tell you what's really bad is anybody watching now sees you're in a different shirt. You're disgusting. You had a lot of meat at Fogo de Chao last night. You have the meat sweats. Do we have that picture of when Mike was getting up in the shirt that he was wearing? Look at the back sweat. This was 20 minutes into the show.
Yeah,
he had back sweat. His pits were all pitted out. I mean, it was disgusting. So he's changed into the muscle shirt thing, and he's probably going to sweat that out. That is going to be worse than any game we get tonight, quite honestly. That's sweat.
Rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
I can see
Isn't
why
it, Jesse?
Pat McAfee goes with the sleeveless shirt now. This is way more comfortable. I feel free. I feel airy. God, let me tell you what, Fogo de Chao, as someone in their mid-30s, I wasn't ready for how hard that was going to hit. So not my finest moment, not the best smells in the apartment, but we moved on and we found a way. Gojo and Golic here on the DraftKings Network. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. And now what a great moment to get to bring our friend, our former colleague, great ESPN insider, Mike Tannenbaum, in with us as he watches me have a flashback meat sweat here on the show. Mike, good morning, man. How you doing?
Good thing we didn't have like a GoPro cam in my apartment, because I would have been right there with you, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt there's meat sweats, and I'm sure Mike, through his years as a GM, has seen many of O&D linemen have some meat sweats. There's no doubt about that.
I didn't think about that at the combine, Mike, when you're going through all these meetings with these guys getting ready for the biggest job interview of their life or coming from medicals and stuff here. How are the smells in those rooms? Are you getting these guys when they're relatively clean in the meetings with teams?
Actually, I'll tell you a great story. It's the God's honest truth. You know, you sit there and you have interviews and they just seem like they're endless. You're in these windowless rooms. And one year at the Jets, I'm looking down and it looks like, literally, no exaggeration, like the floor is moving. And I look down and there's like this ant pile right below Rex Ryan's chair. And it's all these crumbs from the wings that he's eating incessantly. And I just start cracking up, like, here we are running this multi-billion-dollar franchise and we have freaking ants as these guys are coming in for job interviews.
Oh my God. I have never related more to Rex Ryan in one moment than I do in this moment right now. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So,
you know, I always say, like, you know, how do you break ties and disagreements? I always got my way with Rex. Anytime we had a disagreement, where I would just go get an emergency mocha frappuccino. And if it was a really big disagreement, it was with extra whipped cream. So we were always like 700 to 800 calories away from making really good decisions.
All right, there we go. You know what? I feel like I would have done pretty well on your staff if this is the motivation that we're using to get to the decisions made. So, Mike, I don't know how many calories then went into the mock draft that you put out yesterday, but did you have to throw more over the top once you saw the Russell Wilson signing to have to go back and redo your work right after?
Yeah, I got a call late last night from an ESPN.com editor, and he's like, we got to make some changes. So, you know, we made some changes. We actually had Pittsburgh moving up basically to number 10 with Chicago to go ahead and get Shedeur Sanders, because now I think with Russell Wilson, I think he could be there at 10.
So that was, I guess, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So what, you know, as a former GM, take us into that thought process of the Giants bringing in Jameis Winston, bringing in Russell Wilson. There are those that still say they could be in the market for a Shedeur Sanders, thinking Cam Ward will be gone at 1. What's the thought process?
Yeah, so like, to me, I think this way it's going to fall. I think Cam Ward goes 1. I don't think there's any question about that, guys. And then I think it gets super interesting after that, Mike. In my opinion, you know, not that we referenced the 1984 NBA draft a lot, but you know, if you remember, that was Akeem Olajuwon, then Sam Bowie famously went to Portland, and then it was, you know, Michael Jordan to the Bulls. I'm not saying that Travis Hunter is going to be Michael Jordan, but what I am saying is, you know, in this day and age of load management and trying to take loads off of athletes, here's a guy that averaged over 114 snaps a game. So you talk about competitiveness, durability, intelligence. Like, I think he could be truly like a once in a generation complete unicorn. And if I'm the Browns, I don't think you can pass on that, guys. And then to me, that's where everything gets into the soup of, like, what do the Giants do? You got Shedeur, now you got Wilson and Winston, and it's fascinating to me.
So if you're the GM of the Giants going and making this move, are you pulling the trigger on Shedeur Sanders if the draft board does fall like that? In the mock, I know you didn't have it there, but all of a sudden that's different than your future and the organization's future, which are kind of on the line in New York right now.
Yeah. So like for me, guys, like what I think is, if you had Winston, you go Sanders. But now that you have Wilson, I think you could trade back. I think Shedeur is a really good player. I comped him to Kirk Cousins. And if you look back in 20 years, you don't care if you get Kirk Cousins at 3, 10, 20, whatever. He's a really good quarterback for a long time. I think he's a high floor, low ceiling guy. You know what's remarkable about Shedeur, guys? He was sacked 94 times over 2 years. He missed one game. And when you look at the NFL in 2023, 66 quarterbacks started a game and 59 started last year. So durability is a massive issue at the quarterback position. So if I'm the Giants, I have a little bit flexibility. Maybe I trade back and try to get him. I think taking him at 3 is a little bit of a heavy lift, and I think the Wilson signing kind of singles that.
So when you're getting ready for a draft, and I always talk about the grades of the quarterback and where they're graded, if they're franchise quarterback or not, how much, I guess, overvalue is there or reach is there at the quarterback position in a draft?
Yeah, that's a simple question, a really complicated answer. I could just go back to firsthand sort of experience, Mike. You know, when we were at the Jets, we were at 17. We went up to 5 to get Sanchez. Obviously, that worked out, got us to a couple championship games. I think when you see a quarterback, you just got to go get them. And, you know, to me, there's some other teams, Mike, that makes for a fascinating discussion. Like, for example, beyond the Steelers, Browns, and Giants, but like if I'm the Rams, I need a quarterback. Like I know that Stafford is in a year-to-year situation. So in my mock draft, I had Jackson Dart going there. I don't know if he makes it there. Does Tyler Shugg at 26 years old go in the first round? Because I think if you're a team that doesn't have a quarterback or may not have one in a year or two, you know, do you have to go get one? Like, so for example, the Jets, I love the Justin Fields signing. I've always been a Justin Fields guy, 4-2 as a starter in Pittsburgh last year, but do they get a quarterback as well? I think there's a number of teams in that secondary quarterback market that will really make this fascinating.
The Jackson Dart fit in Los Angeles, I think, was one that stuck out to me when I looked at your mock draft. Anyone going to that Sean McVay offense is going to be the right environment for a young quarterback to get the best chance to succeed. Looking around at the rest of the first round that you drafted, who's the most intriguing potential fit that you see out there between player and team in the first round?
Yeah, Shamir Stewart. Earlier in the day, I had him going to Pittsburgh, but in that same spot now, I have him going to Chicago. I think he's the highest variance player in the draft. If we saw a Hall of Famer, his measurables, guys, if you look carefully, they're not far away from Myles Garrett. I mean, that's his ceiling. On the other hand, over the last 3 years, he only had a sack and a half each year. So if you go by the film, you're like, tons of ability, but where is it? On the other hand, you know, if you're looking for high-end traits, he's really, when you talk to people around the league, there's a lot of mixed opinions on him, and it'll be fascinating, A, to see where he's drafted, and B, how it turns out.
You know, on many people's, like their draft boards, not the actual mock draft, but draft boards, they have either Abdul Carter #1 or Travis Hunter #1. In your mock draft, you have Mason Graham, the D tackle from Michigan, going 3 to the Giants, and Abdul Carter going 5 to Jacksonville. Why the D tackle first?
Because I'm on with you guys.
There we go.
Nice answer.
Next question. No, I just think for the fit, you know, he's a former wrestler. He plays with leverage. I'm sure you guys see it. Like, I love his game and his film. Yeah. And with the Giants, when you have Thibodeau and Burns, like, to me, like that would be a really difficult front to deal with when you put Graham between those guys. I think Abdul Carter is going to be great. I think at 4, if we go back a year ago, I told everybody from day one, like, the Chargers are taking an offensive lineman. I don't care that they moved on, you know, from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They are going to take an offensive lineman. They take Joe Alt. And I think Vrabel, in some ways, like, when you look at what they've done, guys, they are not going to go into the season with Verdarian Lowe at left tackle. That's just not going to happen. You know, they were 28th in pass block win rate. You know, it's been well documented, all the sacks that Drake May had. And I was the assistant GM of the Jets. We lost 2 quarterbacks in 7 snaps, Chad Pennington, Jay Fiedler. And I said, look, I don't care if John Elway's in this draft. If we can't protect the quarterback, we're going to cancel the season. We took DeBrickashaw, Ferguson, and Nick Mangold, and they were great players for us, very foundational. And I think about the Patriots much the same way. They've, even last night, they got Stefon Diggs. Maybe they overpaid Milton Williams. I think he's going to be a great player, Morgan Moses. But knowing Mike Vrabel and the way he thinks about the game, they will cancel the season and go 0-17 before they go out there with Verdarian Lowe, who's a really good backup. But my point is, like, Armand Membo, who played on the right side, I think he could shift to the left. I think he has ideal length, athleticism. I think he's a 10-year left tackle. I think you turn in the card and say, we got our quarterback, and now we have somebody to protect his blind side. And I just don't think Mike Vrabel, the way he thinks about the game, is going to go into the season without an answer at that position.
I would tend to agree there. They're doing a great job of starting to build that foundation around Drake May. You mentioned, while this isn't draft related, but kind of relates, the Stefon Diggs signing in New England. Were you surprised by the numbers on that contract? And what do the Patriots need to supplement that receiver room in the draft around him?
Yep. So, look, I think Matt Collins is a really interesting signing. Anytime you can get a receiver that where walks barefoot is interesting, and maybe somebody else steps up for them. They're young guys over the last couple of years, but I like Diggs. I think he's a really good player. He tore his ACL in October. The axiom guys of let's pay a player for what he's going to be, not for what he was, is really important here. I really want to see the details of the guarantees, how much, when, is it injury or skill? But look, in his prime, Diggs was highly competitive, great route runner. You can play him inside the numbers, outside the numbers. So it could be a good signing. I would just want to, sort of like proceed with caution with that.
So it looks like two running backs, Ashton Genty and Amarian Hampton, will be first rounders. Have we seen a resurgence? Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, and we just talked last year about the undervalue of the running back. Is there value back in the running back position?
I think so. And again, I think, just putting my hat on when I was with the Jets and we're chasing Tom Brady, knowing that, hey, our passing game isn't going to be Tom Brady, but how can we control the game? How can we beat him? And our answer was offensive line, good defense, run the ball. And every time we ran the ball, that was one less snap that Tom Brady could throw it against us. So I think when you look at Vegas in particular, Mike, I think what's fascinating is, you get a 73-year-old head coach. He's there to stabilize the franchise. Geno Smith, we could argue, but he's a B/B+. He's a stabilizing quarterback, not elite. And then to me, a guy like Genty, guys, he had 1,700 yards last year after contact. And I don't think he's as thick as beast mode, but when you go back to those days of Marshawn Lynch in Seattle with Pete, I think that's the way, again, he views the game. And I think for him, he never lost value of the running back position. So, and look, difference in the Super Bowl was Philly's offensive line and Saquon Barkley. So I totally agree with that point.
Yeah, shout out to Howie Roseman doing invaluable things for the O-line community and the brand of building beef up front here. Check him out all over ESPN in the lead up to the draft. Former Jets GM, current ESPN insider Mike Tannenbaum. Mike, we always appreciate the time, man. Hopefully no crumbs and ant piles in your immediate future here. Thank you, sir.
If I could get a similar shirt to add to my attire, I would wear it next time I'm on with you guys.
All right, there we go. We're adding it to the rider for you the next time you come through here, Mike.
All right, thanks so much.
Mike.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Awesome stuff. Dad, one of the things he mentioned there with New England, and I think is the right way of going about it, does highlight the rise of Armand Membo. If you didn't know him before the Combine, went and tested through the roof there. And during the season, Missouri kind of took a step back from the year prior. Big, physically impressive freak of an athlete there that does seem like he's primed to be the first O-lineman off the board, usurping a guy like Will Campbell, who was thought to be, going back to last year, the consensus top offensive lineman in the draft.
Yeah, he really made a rise from the Combine, made people go back and look at more tape. Again, he would go from the right side to the left side, which, there's certainly, it's not an easy transition, but think he's athletic enough to do it.
Yeah, no, it's always the gamble that you take, but it's one that if you're the Patriots, you're probably willing to go with. Coming up next, speaking of gambles, young players getting called up to the show. Let's get ready for opening day with Tim Kurkjian in hour number 2 next.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Cam Smith, the fast-rising 22-year-old Astros slugger acquired from the Cubs this offseason, has made the opening day roster for Houston. So his ascension to the major leagues has been absolutely meteoric. He played just 32 games in the minors last season after being drafted 14th overall by the Cubs in July. According to MLB.com, that's the third fewest games played by a position player before he made it to the big leagues since 1965. Smith tops DraftKings Rookie of the Year odds in the AL at plus 450. Tim Kurkjian will break down this and much more when we come back for Hour 2 of Gojo and Golic.
Somebody check on Mrs. Matt. I'll do it. I'll go. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go check on Mrs. Matt.
I mean, I'll volunteer to check on Mrs. Matt. Hubba hubba.
These are mascots we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, but Mrs. Met is hot. Mrs. Met is the Robin
Yeah.
Hood and the Disney version of Robin Hood. Hot.
It's probably a dude underneath there. Now we know why you love anime,
right? This is-
Gojo.
All right, easy. All right, let's not go that far. Those are wild accusations.
I'm kidding.
Did you see a Goofy movie? The son Goofy in a Goofy movie. He's also hot.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 here on Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. And Major League Baseball, I know we already had opening day technically in the game over in Japan with the Cubs and the Dodgers, but opening day at large begins for Major League Baseball tomorrow. And I'm so excited to welcome in Tim Kurkjian, our great friend, ESPN baseball analyst, who is the person who, when I think of baseball and joy, I think of most at all. He's got a podcast with his son, Great Game or What, that you guys can check out as well, highlighting that joy. But I do have to, unfortunately, ask you after that bump back that we just had of a show memory, Tim Kurkjian, is Mrs. Met objectively attractive? Yes or no?
I I'm going to say yes. When you look like me, all women are attractive. I did a game in Cincinnati once, and the mascot for the Reds, while I was doing like the lead in to the game from the field, came up and like she kind of flirted with me right before I was going on the air, and she had a head this big, that of a baseball. So, story of my life: a woman is actually interested, and she's got a baseball head that's this big.
You know what? It makes sense, Tim, given your love of baseball, which exceeds anyone's I've ever met, that an actual physical baseball would love you back like that. So I'm not surprised in the least. So, Tim, let's talk about it. The season tips off tomorrow here. What are you personally most excited about with this upcoming Major League season?
Well, it's kind of obvious, but I want to see how great the Dodgers are going to be. I saw them twice in spring training. The depth in their rotation, especially when Ohtani comes back to pitch, is ridiculous. The similar depth in their everyday lineup is equally ridiculous. And I just want to see how many games they're going to win. Now, that doesn't guarantee they're going to win the World Series, but they are really, really good, maybe historically good moving forward this year. I also want to watch Juan Soto to see exactly what he does for the Mets, because I saw what he did for the Yankees last year. And I want to watch the entire American League, because I don't see a great team in the American League. And there are about 12 of them that are good enough to make the playoffs, but I don't think there's a great one in there. It should be a really fun ride in the American League.
Well, let's talk about one young player in the American League for the Astros, Cam Smith. I mean, this kid, this slugger, has been setting the world on fire. Where do you put him on the Paul Skeens level of rookie and what he can do?
Well, no one's on the Paul Skeens level. It was absurd what he did last year. He was basically the best pitcher in the game from the second he came up until the final game. I would say 95% of the baseball writers are going to predict that Paul Skeens will win the Cy Young this year. He is a different guy. He is enormous. And he has tremendous stuff. And fellas, I was the dugout reporter, as I am every year at the All-Star game. And he started the All-Star game last year, and he was walking up and down in the dugout. He must have walked 20 times through the dugout, and he never looked at anybody. He was in a trance, which is where the great pitchers, the great players go to before they go out there. So there's nobody like Paul Skeens, but Cam Smith has a chance to be really good, and I just love it that he made a club when people didn't think he would. And I am a big believer. If a guy's good enough, just throw him out there on opening day and let him figure it out. If it's going to affect him long term, then maybe he's not the great player you think he's going to be. Give him a shot right away.
I'm with you. Great to see him get that opportunity. Going to be one to keep an eye on. You mentioned the American League overall, Tim, and Juan Soto now lives in the other side of New York playing for the Mets. What's the outlook for the Yankees this season? What are they going to be able to do now that he's departed? This is still a team with the fourth highest payroll in baseball, but what are the expectations there?
Well, I'm thoroughly confused about the American League East, including the Yankees. I thought they would be the team to beat, and then Garrett Cole was lost for the season. And then Luis Gil, who is the rookie of the year, he's going to start the season on the injured list. And we're not sure when Giancarlo Stanton's going to play. So 3 major injuries to the Yankees have thrown their season way up in the air. Now, do I think they're still good enough to get to the playoffs and go back to the World Series? I do, but that's in part because, as I said, I don't see a great team in the American League. So the Yankees have as good a chance as any, but a bunch of things are going to have to happen there if this is going to work, because those injuries and no Juan Soto, it's a different club from last year.
So talking about Juan Soto going to the Mets, improving their chances for a pennant, but I mean, it's the Dodgers and then everybody else. And even in their division, I mean, where are they considered to fall between Atlanta and Philly and the Mets?
Well, I think the Mets are a playoff team. I think the Phillies are better than they are. I think the Braves are better than they are. I think the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers are better than they are. And it's possible 5 or 6 of the best teams in baseball are all in the National League. But the Mets, once they get their pitching healthy, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, it should be good enough. That offense is going to be great because, as I told you, the minute that Soto showed up with the Yankees, they became a demonstrably better offensive team because everyone on the team looked at him and said, that's what a great major league at bat looks like every time he goes to the plate. He's going to do the same thing for the Mets. They're a very dangerous team, but they're in a very difficult division. I think the Phillies and Braves are better, but the Mets are still a playoff team for me.
For the Braves specifically, how much better? Like, are the Braves a team where if they stay healthy can compete on the level of the Dodgers, or what is the ceiling for that group?
Well, again, the Dodgers are in a different category, but if Ronald Acuna Jr. comes back and is the MVP like he was a couple of years ago, and Spencer Strider, who's just one of the best pitchers in the game, can come back and be effective after missing all of 2024, yes, the Braves have a chance to be a really good team that can win the division and can go head-to-head with the Dodgers in October. But again, they got to get those guys healthy. A few other things have to happen. But I repeat, the National League is loaded, especially in the American National League East.
So you mentioned it's up in the air in the American League. I'd be remiss if I didn't selfishly ask about my Cleveland Guardians and where they fit.
Yeah, the Guardians have great pitching, Mike. Their starting pitching is good. Their bullpen is tremendous. I still wonder how are they going to score enough runs to win the division, make the playoffs. But I said the same thing last year, and they won the division last year. So Stephen Vogt, their manager, is so good at this. And when you can pitch like they do, defend like they can, I think they have as good a chance as anyone in that division to win the division. However, the Royals and the Tigers also made the playoffs last year, and the Twins were the leader in the division for most of the season and then faded at the end. 4 teams can win that division, but the Guardians have as good a chance as anyone to win the Central.
Tim, taking a step back for a moment here, we mentioned tomorrow going to be opening day overall, but we did get to kick off the season in a bit of an interesting way with the series over in Japan between the Dodgers and Cubs. I just wonder what your overall impression of that was, seeing the showcase, especially for Shohei Ohtani and so many of the Japanese players on that team, to get a chance to go back home and play in front of a crowd in an environment like that at the Tokyo Dome.
Look, it was great, period. Now, I'm 68 years old, and I would rather see baseball start every team on April the 1st, and we run a parade through Cincinnati like we did when I was a kid. But those days are over, and those 2 games in Japan were amazing. The crowds in Japan were incredible. The love of baseball over there is remarkable. And the number of Japanese pitchers who come, especially pitchers who come to this country now, I mean, that Roki Sasaki guy threw 101 miles an hour with a split from hell. How is anybody going to hit that guy? And once the Dodgers get, Ohtani ready to pitch, and you got Yamamoto, Sasaki, and Ohtani in the rotation, my goodness, how much depth is that? It's just another reminder how good the baseball is in Japan. 15 years ago, Bobby Valentine, who knows everything about Japanese baseball, told me every everyday player in Japan could make a major league team. That's how good the level of play is over there. And the pitching is even better than the everyday players.
So as we continue to look at Japanese players being in Major League Baseball and young players making a rise into the league, how about a player who has been around, 14 years with the same team? Angels aren't going to be in contention for anything, but Mike Trout moving to right field. What's his legacy going to be with the injury bug hitting him during his career?
Well, it's going to be real interesting to see how it goes this year because most people don't believe this. Right field is a different position than center field. And when you've played your entire career in center field, Now you're moving to a corner. That's an adjustment. And one of the Angels told me he thinks that Mike Trout will stay healthier this year because he's going to play right field. There's less ground to cover, but he's going to be so focused on how to play a new position that instead of playing center field and wondering, how am I going to avoid getting hurt? He has something else to focus on. I think it's going to help. The legacy is already set. I'm sorry, fellas. A friend of mine asked me the other day, who told me Mike Trout is not a Hall of Famer. He is no longer a friend of mine after saying that. Mike Trout is one of the greatest players we've ever seen. If he never plays another game, he's a Hall of Famer. He's still one of the greatest players I've ever seen. We'll see how much he's got left. My guess is he's still got plenty left.
Yeah, I would drop that person as a friend as well for saying that. Only a couple minutes left, Timmy, and it may take more to answer this, but going off of the current game, the passing of Pete Rose, do you think Pete Rose will ever get in the Hall of Fame?
I think there's a better chance now than there was a couple months ago, but it's not going to be easy. And, he's going to have to go through the proper channels. Remember, Cooperstown, they own the museum. They're in charge of it. You don't tell the people in Cooperstown what to do with the Hall of Fame. It's their club. It's their museum. And you're going to have to go through the proper channels. And I'm still not sure if we go through the proper channels, put him on the writer's ballot, whether he would get 75% or put him on a special ballot where players are voting at, got to get 12 out of 16 votes to get in. I'm not sure either, but I think it's time to revisit this, not just because he died. I just think with all the gambling in the game, we can at least take a look at this and see where it's going.
I think you're right, and I hopefully we'll get to see an opportunity for that to happen. Timmy, you're the best. We appreciate all your time today. Again, greatgameorwhat.com is where you can go listen to the podcast with Tim and his son. Check him out all over ESPN. A wonderful time of year for you. So, Timmy, in advance, happy opening day tomorrow. Excited for you to get back to working every day around the game you love.
Well, thanks, fellas. Can't wait till tomorrow. National holiday for me.
There you go. Thanks, Timmy.
There we go. Hopefully many more run-ins with mascots with baseball-shaped heads for Tim Kurkjian in his future here. The game loving. You know what? I'm glad we can all admit on and talk honestly about Mrs. Met Dad. Even Tim Kurkjian, the consummate professional, understands and acknowledges what we all see.
Well, it's just hard to talk about mascots and the word sexy in the same sentence, right? I mean, because you don't think of that. You never think of that. Obviously, the Mets thought of that. But you don't think of that. You think of a cool mascot, a cool outfit, but you never put sexy with mascot.
I would.
Well, no, usually
it.
with mascot, you'd think maybe intimidating. Maybe that was the original aim of all this. And then you got mascots like Gritty that border into the absurd. And then somewhere along the way, someone's like, what if we gave Mrs. Met a wagon? And then the rest was history. So you want me to lie about it? I'm not going to do it. Coming up next, the March Madness ratings may be telling a truth about what people do and don't want to see in the tournament. Next on Gojo and Golic. Dallas Mavericks assistant GM Michael Finley walking up and swiping the beer from Luka Doncic after the game. Luka hanging out with his dad in the tunnel, enjoying a victory beer. And while he was hugging someone, Michael Finley comes over and very casually swipes the beer out of Luka's hand. How would you feel, Dad, someone swiping your victory beer?
Whatever hand they swipe my victory beer with would be hurt. Yeah, no one's taking my beer. Go ahead and have yourself a beer after. Are you kidding me?
Just a sign of things to
The
come.
beginning of the end.
Yeah, we should have known.
We all should have seen the
What are you taking the man's beer for?
Victory beer.
What are you taking the man's beer for? He has a victory beer. I mean, what's the big deal? He just sweated out 1 million calories running up and down the court. I know Dallas obviously didn't think he was in good shape, but my God, the man have a beer.
Also have some
Here's my
self-awareness. There's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
That's
That's
other
probably
part.
why
you
the
just
GM
gotta
took it.
know.
Yeah.
I think this is a spot where you really had to know your teammate. Like, I had plenty of teammates who would go out on Thursday nights during the week before game week, and they kind of needed that to be at ease, to do whatever they do. That was part of their routine, and I knew they still showed up on Saturday and got the job done. The scouting report for Luka seems to have always been the dude likes beer and hookah. And so if that's what he needs to go and ball, it's not like it had held him back out on the court from being, checks notes, one of the best young stars in the NBA. Lock in, Mavs, Jesus.
So I will not mention his name, and I will not mention the team I was on. I played for 3 teams in the NFL, and I will not mention this person's name or position, just I don't want it to ever get back to him. But he was a guy who would go out the night before games, whether it was a home game where you stayed in a hotel and had curfew check, or a road game where you stayed in a hotel and had a curfew check. And he would break curfew and he would go out and he would drink, right? And that's kind of how he played. And oh, by the way, he was our leading tackler. And basically the coach said to him, listen, you go do your thing. I get it. You're playing well. Just don't take any teammates with you, right? Don't take anybody with you. If that's how you do you and you're playing well, so be it. I mean, I was like, yeah. I mean, listen, if it ain't affecting his play, so be it.
Yeah, if you're that incredibly talented, then, and that's your process, it's not going to work for everybody. If you wasn't that good, it wouldn't have worked.
Yep.
It's got to respect the process of creatives like Luka Doncic. I have always said this. Jesse, I don't know if there's a Luka Doncic equivalent right now in March Madness, but a lot of good players apparently leading to a lot of good numbers here. We had questions about this the other day because there hadn't been enough Cinderellas for people. There weren't enough upsets or buzzer beaters or whatever the complaints were here, and the numbers seem to disagree with this popular sentiment that something's wrong with March Madness.
Yeah, apparently we don't need any Cinderella stories because throughout the first 2 rounds, the NCAA tournament is averaging 9.4 million viewers per game across CBS, TNT, TBS, and True TV, marking the highest average audience through the round of 32 since 1993. This, according to Nielsen ratings. So, I mean, doesn't seem to matter that it's, mostly chalk so far, and we haven't seen a lot of Cinderella stories. People don't care. They're tuning in.
And listen, I mean, it wasn't just for the first and second round. True TV had its most watched first 4 on record. The play-in games, the first 4. I mean, on Tuesday and Wednesday. So it is a tournament that has always been watched, but the ratings continue to go up even without any Cinderella stories. Again, the lowest seeded team is 10th ranked Arkansas, but there's no 11, 12, or a teen seed, that's making that an incredible run.
Yeah, it's interesting now. Nielsen, and this is way too inside baseball, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. Nielsen did change how they did the ratings a little bit in the last few years, and so I do wonder if part of this is just you're capturing from a wider audience already in a way that was going to up some of this. But Dad, at the very least, it holding steady, because you look on the women's side, I've seen some stuff where relative to last year in the Caitlin Clark final tournament, the ratings are a bit down at the beginning of the women's tournament, which has historically been one that's backloaded. Most of the good teams we know going to run through the first weekend, and then once we get to the Sweet 16 and on, we start seeing the matchups that really drive that tournament. And so for the men's tournament, there's a lot more baked into week one or weekend number one for March Madness that was automatically going to bring people to the places where these are counted. But I do think there is something to, Dad, the known commodities moving on here. And I think now especially I'll be more interested to see, hey, now that we've got lots of good on good and not some unknown that we're getting to know who's made a great run that might also turn back into a pumpkin at some point, what this is going to look like for the Sweet 16 and beyond for the men.
Oh yeah. I definitely think the matchups, obviously Cooper Flagg, the most well-known player by the casual fan, other than those that really watch college basketball. But Cooper Flagg will certainly be one watched by the casual fans. And obviously the Calipari with Arkansas, how far can he take them? Obviously is a storyline as well as always which number one seed will be the first one to lose.
We're in a weird place with Duke right now, I feel. And I don't know, again, I'm not a diehard college basketball fan, so at Gojo and Golic, if someone wants to tell me differently. Like, we just went through Notre Dame, I don't believe in the football realm has ever been as nationally loathed as Duke basketball has always seemed to be, right? Duke always had this archetype of sort of a hateable white star on their team, and a lot of people saw Cooper Flagg commit there and thought, oh, here we go again, the next iteration of, I guess most recently you'd probably say Grayson Allen in terms of that guy that towed the line. But, Dad, whether it's Mike Krzyzewski retiring and John Shire taking over this team, or Cooper Flagg just being flat out good and us not really being overly worried about his personality and there being no other antics, I don't know. Is this Duke team, it's never really felt hateable this season. Maybe the SEC took a lot of the air out of the room, but it just doesn't feel like there's any sort of really strong polarization one way or another with this Duke squad.
No, because nobody tripped anybody or pushed anybody, to make them a hateable team. And I think there's just a kind of an amazement with Cooper Flagg. Remember, he should be a senior in high school right now. He should be a senior in high school. He reclassified, started the season at 17 years old, and is going to be the presumptive number one pick in the NBA draft. So I just think there's more amazement with this guy is this young and this good and still should be in high school. And we still do have the crossover to the women's game. We've talked about the last team to win both the men's and the women's. It was actually UConn did it the last two times in 2004 and 2014. You have Mississippi, Maryland, Duke, and Tennessee as crossovers of men and women all in the Sweet 16. And Duke's a number one seed in the men's side, a number two seed on the women's side. They're in the same region as South Carolina. So I'm not sure if it's going to happen this year, but there are 4 shots for it to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the teams you mentioned on the women's side are out of the group that I would consider in the running for actually winning a championship. But Duke and the fascination around Cooper Flagg, I think, is only going to grow, as we have fewer games left, but also this is coinciding with us getting closer and closer to the end of the season when a lot of the fans of bad NBA teams are thinking about the draft. And so if you're a team near the lottery, I'm sure you're going to go want to see your guy. And quite honestly, after the Juju Watkins injury that we just saw in women's college basketball, I do wonder how many of those folks are going to be worried now sitting here watching the end of this tournament run, just praying to God that this guy makes it through in one piece, because he has, going into this last year, Dad, we had a conversation about, hey, who might be the number one overall pick? This was a draft that was lauded for having multiple players that seemed number one overall worthy. And now when you combine play with his age that you mentioned, he seems to be overwhelmingly the answer of, oh, yeah, this guy that we saw go toe-to-toe with some of Team USA's best last summer seems to be the stock answer for, hey, yeah, we want him, so let's go and check out this guy while he finishes the run at Duke.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Zion Williamson when he was in college and got hurt, and obviously he's had injury issues in the pros, not to say it's all related to college, but it certainly was you're right. You have a situation where, oh my God, yeah, okay, it's great you're making a run in the tournament, but please don't get hurt.
Yeah, so fingers crossed on that front here. But you're right, it wasn't, and I wondered if Cooper Flagg was going to be the guy, a star player at Duke at a time where men's college basketball needed stars. We never got the same mania as Zion Williamson or anything really close to that during the regular season. But now this postseason run will be one to put a bow on and see if that, or put a pin in to see if it can reach anything there. I saw this yesterday, Dad. Tom Izzo still dancing right now. And a guy who, one of the last remaining coaches from the old guard that hasn't retired, maybe him, Cal, and Pitino certainly are the names of note that people think of from that class of coaches, most of whom have gone by the wayside now. And Tom Izzo got asked a question about the transfer portal, which, like in college football, opens while the playoff of the sport is still going on. We dealt with this in our sport, and now in the spring, we're seeing college basketball coaches have to reckon with this. And Tom Izzo did not hold back giving his feelings on this subject. Take a listen.
I'm going to worry today about the guys I got in this program that have done an incredible job this year, and that's it. And if that costs me later, so be it. But Tom Izzo isn't cheating the people that he has that have been loyal to him for this chaos that is going on out there. Is that cool? You got enough? No, because you don't understand. When I came back Sunday night, that was it. There was nothing on my mind but giving these guys a chance to win one more game, get to Elite Eight, and one more game, and have a memory that'll last their entire life, their kids' life, and their grandkids' life.
Wow.
Third person Tom Izzo. They pissed him off that much, Dad. And listen, normally this is the territory where we do like the old man yelling at cloud thing of someone complaining about the way things are. But I do think this one is just that having these teams have to worry about the transfer portal while we're in the middle of overwhelmingly the biggest product that college basketball has seems asinine. J.J. Watt indicated as much. Like, putting your free agency period in the middle of your playoff period is just bad business for a sport in general, let alone, to Tom Izzo's point, deeply unfair to everyone involved who's trying to go out here and potentially get their one shining moment.
Oh, I mean, I think it's ridiculous. We talk about there needs to be a change in college football. I would imagine, I'm sure college coaches would like a change in college basketball. Again, the adults need to make the decisions, right? And what's best for the sport. And is the portal opening on last Monday, what's best for the sport? I mean, it just seems, and in college football, where spring games are third week of April, the portal opens April, I think, 16th to the 25th. So there are teams that are not having spring games to showcase players that'll end up, because your team can change from the springtime of what you have, and what spring is supposed to kind of set in somewhat stone the team you're going to have going into next season. But then you have changes in the spring in football, and now your team changes, but you have no more practices until August. You have your summer workouts, but your team is now changed, and you're not in pads again until August to work on your new team. It just seems like there needs to be a bit of an overhaul.
If we can't get them to do it altruistically for the benefit of everyone involved here, we can at least speak the language that appears to move the needle for decision makers in college. You can make more money if you change this up. Think about what you can do and the attention that will be drawn to your sport, college basketball, if all of a sudden you get to cover March Madness and the tournament and all these great teams and this tournament that's built up so much capital with everyone. And then you get to turn around and basically have free agency that you can cover, make it a more year-round product. I know everyone always is chasing the NFL in terms of making their sport something you can cover year-round. But if college sports, you do this and you do the thing that is more fair to the people involved here, the NFL, I grant you, and with college, we'd have to look to it, the dates surrounding turning pro, making yourself eligible for the draft, all this other stuff that butts up in the calendar and becomes unwieldy because of the academic portion. But if you're speaking just from, hey, what's best for the business model, being able to, as J.J. Watt pointed out, cover free agency after you cover the postseason seems like more time and conversation for everyone in a way that can make you guys all more money. Coming up next, we'll talk about some interesting coaching dilemmas and changes in the world of college sports overall. Next on Gojo and Golic. A large, bald, bearded white man wearing a Reds jersey here who looks awfully familiar to the man I see in the mirror every day. I'm sorry, Kroger. Lawyer up. Because either you're going to cut the check for the NIL deal that I richly deserve, considering this is identity theft, I'm going to get litigious because this is ridiculous. This is a travesty, a sham, and a mockery. It's a Travis sham mockery, Dad.
This is unreal. You have an absolute case here.
Wow. I wasn't here for that.
Wow.
Lawsuit's still pending, by the way. That's at the very least going to make a nice Halloween costume for me somewhere. But it's ridiculous. The amount of times my Aunt Tracy, who I think worked on a contract at some point with the Kroger folks, would point that out is just sickening to me, quite honestly. And I love shopping at the Kroger family of stores. I live out here in Los Angeles. Ralph's is in the umbrella. They've got a lot of the treats that I end up reviewing on these videos. And, Dad, I have to do so every time, conflicted about letting them just wantonly steal my identity like this with no regard for my own image.
Yeah, I mean, this is something you should pursue. This is without question stolen identity. And I think you would have a very, very strong case. Just put that mascot up, stand next to it in a courtroom, and just say, Judge, you decide. You decide.
Simple.
The problem ends up becoming, though, and I've said this very often, every bald-bearded white man looks the same. We're all just like, I give Kyle Long patient zero because he's the biggest one of us that I have known and come to see on record, but in general, we all do kind of look the same. So maybe it's a class action suit on behalf of me and every bald-bearded white guy everywhere. I don't know. We're going to figure out how to get some money out of the Kroger folks because Lord knows they got plenty of it. Guys, speaking of people that look alike doing the same job, hello, this show. We talked about college basketball in the last segment. Big East is going to be fun next year. Xavier,
Yeah.
which is in the market for a new head coach, Sean Miller heading down to Texas, hook 'em horns, getting ready to become the new head coach there, needed a new head coach. And so they looked to the head coach of a team that went 27-8 in the Mountain West Conference last year in the regular season. They beat 7-seed Marquette in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They'd been in the NCAA tournament each of the last 2 seasons, going 53-18 over that span. Head coached by Richard Pitino. We now have Rick Pitino and Richard Pitino both duking it out in the Big East next year, Dad. We've got to do this together for a while. There are plenty of examples of fathers and sons across sports getting to work together. Now seeing father and son coach against each other is going to be damn interesting and an entertaining subplot of a Big East that really felt like it had a resurgence this year with the Pitino name at the helm.
Yeah, Rick Pitino bringing St. John's back was a Big East Coach of the Year earlier this month, now having his son in the conference. And I think if his son comes in and beats him, he won't be all that upset. Just like, listen, for the years we've worked on the show, I've actually dumbed myself down so you could sound smarter than me. I was trying to give you the advantage, right? I mean, that's what a father is supposed to do for their son. So when people say, man, Golic Sr. sounded like that was a dumb comment he made, I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose for you, Mike. Just like Rick Pitino won't be as bummed if his son beats him. What do you think of that?
That sounds great. And if that's the story you want to tell, Dad, my gift to you will be going along with that for the remaining 2 episodes of this show. It is going to be interesting, though, watching the way, because I'm trying to think of other examples, Dad, where we maybe have seen this. Again, fathers and sons in coaching at the same time, not something we're unfamiliar with. And I mean, most recently, the late Monty Kiffin coached with his son, Lane Kiffin, on a couple of spots at the end of his journey, but actually seeing head coach versus head coach in the same conference, too. It's not like they're going to have to go hard to find each other. So just fascinated to see how this is going to work out. But the Patinos really owning a lot of real estate in the Big East. Going to be really fun to watch as Richard Pitino, now expected to become the next head coach at Xavier, joining his father in that conference. Dad, on the other side of things in college sports, really unfortunate situation at Stanford. I say unfortunate because any sign of upheaval and volatility usually is a net L for the players involved in all this. But Troy Taylor, the head coach, now former head coach of the Stanford Cardinal, fired by the university here yesterday, announced by general manager Andrew Luck, because again, right now, Stanford does not have an athletic director. So when it came time to make the decision on this, Andrew Luck, the newly minted general manager, was the one tasked for this. This decision came a week after ESPN had reported that 2 outside firms had found that Troy Taylor bullied and belittled female athletic staffers, sought to have an NCAA compliance officer removed after she warned him of rules violations, and repeatedly made, quote, inappropriate comments about another woman about her appearance. And so, Dad, when you combine that with back-to-back 3-9 seasons, I'm not overly surprised by this result, but the timing of it heading into spring football as this news had all come out, really going to make for a difficult go for this Stanford Cardinal team to find a new coach, get them in time in the portal era to come in and install what you'd need to have anything resembling a successful season.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually going to have to get a coach from a smaller school who will then be put in a tough situation as well, or you're going to have to hire from the staff, from the Stanford staff, and just hire from within. I would say that would probably be the best way. You would keep the same kind of structure, the same kind of offense and defense. I think it would be the easiest transition for players. But it wasn't long ago that even Andrew Luck and the school was backing Troy Taylor and say we're going to work through this. But just too many complaints came out to the point where Andrew Luck had to say Troy Taylor is not the guy that can run this program anymore. But I definitely think they'll have to keep the hiring from within because it is so late.
Yeah, no excuse for treating people the way that Troy Taylor reportedly treating them, according to everything found here. And when that report initially came out and I saw that come to light, it looked an awful lot like fired for cause was going to be in the future. And you look at this, there was a first investigation in spring of 2023, and Taylor then signed a warning letter in February of last year, acknowledging that he could be fired if conduct continued according to those documents. And then right around the corner, additional complaints were documented in a second investigation last July. So, Dad, it seems like you combine all this with the fact that, again, this just was not a good team in the last couple of years, had not been competitive in the ways that during my lifetime we had been accustomed when, you had been dealing with the prior regime at Stanford that started with Jim Harbaugh, that went to David Shaw. This program had been a far cry from that. And they're one, we talk all the time about the academic standards at Notre Dame. Stanford, I had a buddy with mine who was a 5-star quarterback who was coming to play at Notre Dame, who Stanford asked to retake his ACT. That's how serious they take it out west. And so all of those things were already going to make it difficult sledding for them in the modern era of the sport. But, Dad, now a fresh start is how they labeled it, and I think that is appropriate here. You got to bring someone in that's going to give them a chance, and it sounded like the culture around there just was not going to do that under Troy Taylor.
Yeah, and listen, him having back-to-back 3-9 seasons didn't help. As much as people say the success of the team shouldn't matter if a coach is treating staffers like this, we all know in the real world it does. If they were in the playoffs the last 2 years, would this be a different story? You'd like to think not. You'd like to think if you're warned and you repeatedly don't listen to the warnings that are bad to the staffers, that you're going to get fired. I mean, in a statement to ESPN last week, Taylor said he was using the investigation as a learning opportunity, and obviously it didn't seem to learn a whole lot as complaints kept coming in, and eventually Andrew Luck, as you mentioned, no AD at this point, so Andrew Luck, the GM, has to make this decision.
Yeah, I saw John Wilner, who covered the old Pac-12, said yesterday, as people were wondering, hey, Andrew Luck, slide right on in. And he said there's about as good a chance of that happening as Andrew Luck becoming the new athletic director, which is slim to none. So lots up in the air right now for a Stanford program that overall, like the Stanford athletic department, they're one of the people winning the Capital One Cup every year. They've always had a lot of Division I sports and prioritized all of that. And now at a bit of a crossroads here with the one that at least heads it all up in football on the men's side. So again, it's one of those brands I kind of hope can find its way back. I enjoyed those hard-nosed Stanford teams that built their identity around O-line and running attacks for so long. And God, Andrew Luck is such a hit of nostalgia as a guy that is one of the best quarterback prospects of all time and now is back at his alma mater, usually a recipe for success. We'll see if even he can have enough to help get this program back to where it once was. This, that, and the third next on Gojo and Golic. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. It's this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the rest of the day. We've only got 2 of those days left. So download, subscribe, rate, and review. Or don't. Not going to help that much at this point. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out on the DraftKings Network or our YouTube channel, Gojo and Golic, where you can subscribe for all the content over there. Thanks to our guest from today, ESPN NFL insider Mike Tannenbaum joined us to talk about the draft, and ESPN Major League Baseball analyst, writer, all-around lover Tim Kurkjian joined us in hour number 2 to talk about how hot Mrs. Met is. If you missed his take on that, make sure you check out his interview wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with this show. Guys, let's start off with this. Major League Baseball has always done a phenomenal job of feeding the fam when they come to a ballpark. One of my favorite parts about going to a live baseball game is strolling the hallways in the stadium to try and figure out what weird little food item you freaks cooked up. And the Rangers have added their latest addition to the pile here. They have a 24-inch burrito, the Boomstick Burrito, made with a 26-inch tortilla filled with rice, beans, seasoned taco meat, nacho cheese, pico de gallo, lettuce, and sour cream here. Dad, the picture of the tortilla already impressive enough, but the length and girth on this burrito enough to make anyone feel pretty good. So you excited for this one?
Well, yeah, but questions abound. I mean, look how it's presented on a big tray. Is this only for suite holders? I mean, are you taking that back to your seat? You're going to sit there and it's going to cross over 2 people, basically? And how are you going to eat that in your seat? So I don't know if is that for every fan that sits in the seats that you're taking it back? You might need 2 people to carry it, for all I know. So I have questions. I mean, in an effort, some of these stadiums, in an effort to be the best, I mean, are they making something that is for everybody in the stadium?
I don't think an item this freaky was ever going to be for everyone, Jesse. I think this is not for the faint of heart. Most people are more faint of heart than they want to admit. This is for people that came here to do bad things, like me when I go to the ballpark. And so you figure out the rest of that if you care enough, Dad. Jesse, I imagine this is an abomination in your eyes, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's just doing too much. Like, I'm happy with, like, chicken tendies and fries. I don't know. I just feel like now we're getting a little theatrical here with some of these. I don't know.
Yeah.
How many of these are you really going to be selling at the game? And Senior's right. There's a lot of questions. What are we doing with this? Like, it just seems like we're showboating a little bit here and we should get back to basics.
I think the trick is making something unique, but making it easy for the fan to take back to their seat and eat. So, and I'm sure some stadiums have done that.
Well, they have. There's a whole bunch of great new ballpark food that's been being debuted. Darren Ravel's Twitter account is basically just all of this at this point. The one that intrigues me most is a man who really thinks this dessert is having a moment right now. The New York Yankees have Petroni tiramisu in a helmet at their ballpark. I've always loved the ice cream sundaes in a helmet that Major League Baseball parks will do. There's a great churro one at the Dodger Stadium I had last summer. Tiramisu in a baseball helmet sounds like my idea of heaven, and I'm going to find my way to New York this summer to make sure I can mainline as much of that as humanly possible.
I would be more inclined to try like the more dessert types, like the tiramisu, the s'mores quesadilla, the dessert nachos the Colorado Rockies have, the s'mores quesadillas in Philadelphia. And, of course, the White Sox doing the celebration cake shake, Portillo's out of Chicago, and where they actually have one here in Arizona. It is the greatest shake I have ever had in my life, the cake shake from Portillo's. The actual pieces of cake, I don't know how they do it, but you get pieces of cake that go up the straw, that don't clog the straw. It is the greatest shake known to mankind.
It is. It just means that you have to go to the White Sox Stadium, which is a chore in and of itself. So God gives his toughest battles to you, his strongest soldiers, White Sox fans. Good luck with that. Jesse, let's get to that. What do we got?
Okay, so on Tuesday, Woj took to Twitter to tweet out that there was big news incoming. He tweeted out the bomb emoji, which we know was his infamous Woj bombs of the past. Guys, turns out it was just about a Bonnie signing. So fans immediately were like up in arms. What does it mean? Oh my God, is he getting back in the game? Is he? What's next? Nope, it was just about a Bonnie signing. So the Bonnies landed their first major get out of the transfer portal, securing Minnesota big Frank Mitchell for the 2025 season. Guys, I mean, he got our attention, but he also, you can kind of only do this once, right? Like that, it's been used up, right? I don't think you can pull this again.
Jesse, I thought the same thing, but I still think there's enough of Woj bomb. I don't want to that he's done it. That while people, if it's just for a signing, people will get tired of it. But there might be just enough of Woj bomb past that would make you open it. And that's all he's looking for. That's all he's looking for, is just to open it and read it. And if it's just about signings, eventually it will get worn, it will get old. I get it. But the Woj bomb was such a huge thing that I don't know if people can go past it without clicking on it.
See, I just feel like he used up all the juice with this one, because next time he does it, people are going to be like, well, it's just a signing. Whereas this time everyone was up in arms about it. What could it mean? What is it? So it got all this press coverage. Next time, I don't think that happens. I agree with what you're saying, though. He might keep doing it because it's news for them, but it's not going to be news for us the way this one was.
Yeah.
Hits different when the news is that they get Minnesota big man Frank Mitchell, who, I love this in the stats, had double-doubles and then lists against the specific teams. Like, didn't average one. He averaged just over 8 points and 8 rebounds per game in his last 5 games of the season. So a lot of caveats in this that, again, based on how the Woj bomb used to hit, definitely not quite the same now. But I appreciate Woj trying to weaponize his old reputation to help the Bonnies in any way he can. We saw him selling cell phones before to try and pump towards them. That is a company man through and through, and a proud Bonnie in every way, shape, and form. Jesse, let's leave the bombs alone and get to the third. What do we got here?
So a North Carolina man decided to take a very creative approach to a bear problem he was having. He had a black bear that was in his yard. Apparently it was a persistent problem, so he decided to put on a bear costume and go into his backyard to scare off said bear. He's walking slowly towards the bear. Apparently he's growling, and it works. The bear absolutely takes off. Now, don't get me wrong, this is impressive to put on a bear costume and go confront a bear, but I will say I've heard that black bears are very skittish. They're kind of like big fraidy cats, so it's not like he did this and tried to go toe-to-toe with a grizzly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think black bear dad, because we used to have a bunch of these in the woods in Connecticut. They're the one you're supposed to get big, and then a brown bear or grizzly bear is the one where you're supposed to play dead, right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, the black bear is it's only going to really attack when it's pushed up against the wall. When somebody gets too close, it's more defensive. It'll run more than attack. So I'd imagine this guy, he was in a brown bear suit. I don't know how close he actually got, but black bears are more going to run unless there's cubs involved. Obviously, if it's a mom protecting the kids, it's going to be a different story. But for the most part, black bears are going to head the other way.
What I do appreciate is this is high risk, high reward, because it's a wild animal still. It could have flipped the switch and decided it was kill time, and then this guy would have had to try and evade the bear wearing a somewhat clunky bear costume. Like, where did he get this? It looks like a mascot costume that he stole from somebody. I have a lot of questions there. But, Dad, I do remember we used to go walking in the woods, and you guys would carry bear mace when we would go take the dogs for a walk. And one time I just wanted to see what the spray was like, and I sprayed out the bear mace. Big stream of this stuff. And a gust of wind immediately blew it back into my face. And I sat there coughing and on the verge of throwing up. So it works if you're thinking about buying that product.
Yeah. And by the way, me saying the black bears are more defensive and will run away, I'm not getting in a bear suit and chasing a bear away. There's no way I'm doing that. I mean, this guy, like you said, if all of a sudden he's got to turn and run, he's done.
Oh, yeah.
I'm putting on the Kroger costume and I'm chasing that bear away. Download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. We'll talk to you tomorrow. See you then.